You don't see a pattern here?
It's not a pattern.
Do you enjoy having power over women?
I don't even know what that means.
You don't know what it means to have power over women?
I don't have power over anyone. I barely have power over myself.
But you do have power over people. And again, you abuse that power.
All these women that you mentioned, I never forced myself.
Not through force, but you understand the power differential. I'm just pointing out a series of...
You think everything is this nefarious scheme. Most of the bad shit that happens in this world isn't because of wicked plots and machinations. It's just because we're all a bunch of stupid, hungry, horny little goons just grabbing at shit, hoping it'll press that little button in our brain that says, okay, you're happy now.
So here's the thing about Bojack Horseman and his pattern with women across the entire series. Yep. This is gonna be a long one. It's well stated in the show that Bojack does have a visible cycle with the women around him, where he takes advantage of his position, sometimes not consciously, of power over them until he eventually grows discontented and pushes them away. His second interview with Biscuits Braxby explicitly states this to the audience, but even before this occurs, Princess Carolyn mentions that he can't help but be with any woman he works with.
Is there a single woman you've worked with who you haven't tried to groggily thrust yourself into?
And while I do think Biscuits went a bit farther than is true about Bojack's pattern in painting him as a predator to young girls, she does make some excellent points about the similarities between these relationships, both in how they begin and how they end. And even if his relationship with some of these women works out to be eventually at least relatively positive, like Diane or Princess Carolyn, there's even more examples of him ruining the relationship beyond repair and never speaking to the woman again. Even sometimes inflicting irreparable mental damage to the other person. And there are many examples of him taking advantage of his position, whether that be with Marcy, Penny, PC, Diane, Anna, Gina. Jesus Christ, there are a shit ton of examples just in the short period of time we know Bojack. And yes, there is something to be said about the specificities of a few of these. Anna did work for Bojack, but, you know, she kind of played him like a puppet the whole time and also once abused him, remember that? First, he has a problem with boundaries in any woman that he is near that is straight. This often happens to be those he works with, but isn't explicitly limited to that. In fact, I'd say there's likely more women that were one-night stands than he actually dated. We just never meet them because they're not really even characters in Bojack's life. He doesn't even think about them. Not only Princess Carolyn, who was our first foray into the very blurry line between his personal and professional life and the way he uses the women around him, but when we see the scrapbook in season 4 from Marcy, the president of his fan club, we see just how many women Bojack has been with, and this is just in the public eye. And he has sex with the president of his fan club in that episode. Marcy is definitely kooky, but this sub-story has always creeped me out. He slept with her once, knowing full well that she worshipped him, and then never called her again. And she spends years and years waiting for him to come back, and as soon as he does, he sleeps with her again, and then ghosts her again! This isn't the last time he exhibits this behavior either. Commence fracking overall gives us a really dark picture into what Bojack's past and pattern truly has been all these years, and just how many women he's left behind without giving a single thought about how they felt or what he did. It's great that they paint it this way because up until this point, most of it was just one-liners about how much sex Bojack has had, but this paints a really alarming picture and illustrates the pattern beginning to form. Sarah Lynn and Penny are also excellent examples of this lack of self-control that Bojack exhibits. He saw them as daughter figures, as I pointed out in a recent video, until he felt depressed and needed to distract himself, and they were there and willing. Like Biscuits illustrates, they did consent at the time, but that's not where the problem lies in these situations. The issue is that he continues to use these women who he has innate power over in an effort to fuel his need for attention and the ultimate hole inside him, whether he knows it or not. Sarah Lynn knew Bojack since she was a child. He taught her what she knows about show business. To think that he isn't in a position of emotional power over her is wishful. And he was starting to be the same figure for Penny in the 2 months he spent in New Mexico. He took her driving, gives her advice on boys, takes her to prom like her dad actually wants to. And, like Bojack says, he never did this with the intention of taking advantage of them, but it happened nonetheless because he can't control himself when he's feeling depressed and drowning. Plus, the lack of care that he demonstrates in the women that he's with also reflects in his treatment of them in the end. He didn't care enough about Sarah Lynn to call the paramedics right away. He cared more about himself and making sure he would come out all right. At the end of the day, all of this is just for him. One obvious reason for this issue of boundaries is his lack of value in sex. Bojack mainly just uses it to fill the void inside him as he does food and drugs.
You have a real thing with food.
That's what happens when you mix the appetite of a horse with the appetite of someone with a hole inside him that needs to be constantly filled with attention, food, and sex. Pass the bugles.
Which makes it become an empty act. There's no romance, love, or really passion in this for him. Mostly, it's a compulsion. And while Bojack did go to AA, I'm not certain that's the only group he could have benefited from, if you catch my drift. And because of that, he doesn't really value the women he has sex with either. I mean, in the season 1 finale, we see him try to sleep with a fan of his book, but when she says no, he just moves right on to another person.
Hey, do you want to get out of here?
What?
Come back to my place, maybe get a little more naked, honest, and revealing?
Oh, no. No thanks.
What about you?
Yeah, okay.
He doesn't really care about most of these women as people. Honestly, he really does see them as just objects, a means to an end for him to momentarily distract himself. I mean, there's one joke in season 1 where he is having sex and Princess Carolyn isn't even in the bed with him.
Oh, you like that? You like Daddy's good stuff?
Not especially.
Did you get there?
Showing how selfish and depraved this act is, and how little the women actually matter to him at the end of the day. It is all for him to service his own loneliness and need for attachment. And where could he have learned this lack of value in sex or the women around him but from his father, Butterscotch Horseman, a man who, despite how much Bojack would protest, does bear a lot of similarities to our protagonist. We see that from a young age, not only was Bojack exposed to alcohol abuse, but also the abuse of other women. While he wasn't around for the Henrietta situation, he did see his father in his office with his secretary as a child. And while this shows his father using a woman to fulfill his own carnal needs and dissatisfaction, it also shows him cast aside his mother, who places a high value in fidelity and everything that she cares for. Also, in Free Churro, we get a very close-up glimpse of what sort of values Bojack was taught as a child. And while children of abusive parents might want to cast away all the lessons due to the hatred they hold for their guardians, some do internalize at least a few things they were taught, maybe subconsciously. And Butterscotch actively devalues Beatrice and tries to instill that the primary goal of a woman on each day should be making her husband happy.
I emerged from my sanctum this afternoon to discover that not only had she not made me lunch, which is a meal I need in order to live, but she'd furthermore locked herself in the bedroom to weep. Most days, I can't concentrate because my idiot child is blasting the television, and it suddenly dawned on me. Hot cock on a rock, she never even picked up the little noise and snot factory. Here I am, being your mother, which I know is giving you all sorts of mixed up ideas about gender while your brain is still loose and stupid.
Those traditional, problematic values were instilled into Bojack from a very young age, no matter how much he may want to avoid it. Even Beatrice touted these ideals that her father taught her around young Bojack, despite how they betrayed her later in her life.
Anyway, do you want this painting? It belonged to your grandfather, a man who knew what marriage meant.
But who else but I will make sure the numbers add up and compliment my secretary on her tight sweaters?
I mean, there are several obvious parallels between Bojack and his father, setting aside the fact that they're voiced by the exact same person. Bojack does to Marcy what Butterscotch once did to Beatrice, almost the exact same ploy and cadence of denial too.
I had to look you up in the phone book. The number you gave me was to a pizza parlor in Brownsburg.
What? Are you sure?
Oh, Bojack, I'm sorry. I really wanted to tell you, but when I called the number that you gave me, it was for a sandwich shop in Temecula.
What? That's so weird. You must have dialed it wrong.
In Free Churro, Bojack also characterizes them all as drowning, including his father. So even though he tries to differentiate himself from his father, or family in general, he does know that there is at least one thing he has in common. But that one thing happens to be the drowning, empty feeling that causes them to do things like this and use people. However, when he does commit more seriously to a relationship, it is generally only because they have something more or deeper than just sex that he needs. When he meets Wanda, the entire appeal was that she didn't know who he was. For once, he was tired of being recognized and he wanted someone who didn't know who he was already, likely so he could pretend to be someone he's not. We visit this in Yesterdayland, with Bojack refusing to admit to Wanda who he really is at first, and then making a big leap to cover for it, which he immediately realizes a mistake after asking her to move in. He keeps trying to be a person that he fundamentally isn't through big leaps and challenges that he can't ever hope to possibly back up. Because, again, he was only taught how to be good through television, which involves grand gestures. But then, that becomes the problem for him later.
What happened, Bojack?
Same thing that always happens. You didn't know me. Then you fell in love with me. And now you know me.
That she didn't know him, and that's why they didn't work. Excuses, excuses. The actual problem is that you went into this relationship headfirst, only looking at the person you wanted to be, and not the person that you actually are, and how you could realistically deal with that. He doesn't confront his drinking, he doesn't confront his past mistakes, he just states,
You don't make me feel less broken.
I always hated this line. I suppose that could be a good thing, but it feels like you're taking the responsibility off of yourself and putting your own wellness in the hands of another person, which was the entire point of the episode that it was in, too. Higher love? It was about how Bojack has to take care of himself, but at the end of it, he doesn't really resolve to do that. He just resolves to not do the funky Spider-Man. It just shows that he doesn't really keep her around for any reason pertaining to her as a person. It's just because she makes him feel good about himself. And honestly, even if they do share more than sex, that is just as vapid. Whatever it is, it's not love. Bojack does say later to PC,
You know that I don't do the whole love thing. Either you end up hurting someone or they hurt you, so what's the point?
And this is after season 2, when he told Wanda that he loved her, as well as Charlotte and her family. I think a part of that realization comes from this relationship with Wanda, where he was actually able to recognize that he didn't love her. And while yes, she made him want to be better, he ultimately used her to make him feel good about himself before predictably and inevitably sinking down and pushing her away for good. Like, we literally never hear from her again. And listen, I do think Wanda does make a good point in After the Party about some good things taking time, but there isn't much done on Bojack's part after that that warrants that time being taken. Believe it or not, time does not heal all wounds. I don't know who said that phrase, but it was fucking wrong. Time, self-reflection, and therapy heal most wounds. And also bandages. Bandages can be good for wounds. But Bojack just goes on, repeating what he always does, with Kelsey and his job, with Diane, which all eventually lead to the return of his depressive state. And Wanda's protest of it makes her feel more of a hindrance than a help. He's wallowing. He no longer wants to feel good about himself, so he has no use for her. He gave up on the value that Wanda gave him in wanting to feel like a better man. And again, this all speaks to him looking for qualities in women that will pertain to and elevate himself. Like Mr. Peanut Butter says about every Christopher Nolan movie, so true by the way.
Is my problem with women any movie directed by Christopher Nolan? Because yes, women are involved, but it's never really about the women. It's about me.
I've used this clip so many times, but it's so important. With PC, she's able to keep him steady through one of the darkest and most uneventful times of his life. Post-horsing around, but pre-Bojack Horseman. You could see that due to PC's own tendency of working on others when her own life isn't working out, she basically forcibly lifts Bojack off of his ass and gets him a job. She repeatedly does this too, even before she's officially his agent. She catches him passed out on his front lawn and covered in tapioca pudding and helps him inside, without even knowing him. Her need to fix people drew Bojack to her. I don't think their relationship is particularly superficial, especially after the many nuanced years of friendship they have that we had the pleasure of seeing. But there is something to be said about their relationship while they were actually dating. Bojack wasn't actually looking at Princess Carolyn and just needed someone to be able to lift him up. PC offers him a shoulder to lean on since she likes to view herself as dependable, so he gladly takes it and leans on it as hard as he can. In Say Anything, we see Bojack use PC for the sake of distracting himself from what a mess his life was. Spinning out from Diane's proposal and contemplating where he's going with his own life, he rapidly moves to whoever is near and available. PC tries to push him away, but after repeated attempts, she falls for it and indulges Bojack's distraction until he grows tired of it, like always. We can see that this was a repeated cycle with them too. In 2007, when Princess Carolyn gets him Mitch's life, and Bojack wants to move further into the Bojack Horseman show. But when Bojack begins to panic and grow discontented, as he is wont to do on any project he works on, Princess Carolyn tries to continue doing what has previously worked so well for him. But now he only wants to wallow and spiral downward, so he pushes her away again.
I'm not about to take career advice from somebody who's been an assistant for the last 14 years.
Is that how you think of me? As your agent's assistant?
Well, what do you think you are?
I don't know, I guess...
Well, here's some free advice. You should know. Now, why don't you leave this to the grown-ups? If somebody needs coffee, I'll give you a ring.
And PC does have the good sense to distance herself at first, but They break up in the pilot and also have sex throughout season 1, so it ain't over. She falls for it multiple times. Luckily, they remain just friends exclusively after season 1, and Princess Carolyn is able to successfully navigate this relationship platonically. After the second interview with Biscuits, we do see her doubt Bojack and question whether she should be around him or if she was used. Ultimately though, she does stick around and remain loyal with her
I'm here, aren't I?
I don't think she felt used, just that interview put that uncomfortable concept into her head. Plus, other people telling you what your relationship was on live television, not exactly fun. But even if PC used Bojack to help her career as well, there is still a pattern on Bojack's behalf of using PC to lift himself up and then casting her aside when he wants to wallow, apologizing and saying it'll be better next time, only to repeat the cycle over and over again.
I know you're really busy, and I'm sorry for making your life more difficult this week, and also, always. Also, I know that my apologies are pretty much meaningless at this point, and I'm sorry for that too.
His infatuation with Diane in season 1 is also exemplary of this idea. He sees her as the person who can fix him. For whatever reason, she became a moral authority in his life, and he looked to her to teach him how to be good and to assure him that he could be good, as Downer Ending showed us.
Am I just doomed to be the person that I am? The person in that book? I mean, it's not too late for me, is it? It's not too late. Diane, I need you to tell me that it's not too late.
I think part of this has to do with the fact that they have similar upbringings, with Diane's family not really caring or paying attention to her. Bojack saw that she had a shitty father just like him, but had pretty much become an organized and generally good person, as Live Fast Diane Nguyen shows us.
You're a good person, Diane, and that's the most important thing. Even if no one appreciates you, it's important that you don't stop being good. I like how you always bring your own bags to the grocery store and how you're always organized to go places.
And he wanted that for himself. But when she showed how she truly felt about him and what her perception of their time together actually was, Bojack becomes enraged because he can no longer use her as the person he can point to that will assure him that he is good, which is all that he truly wanted from her. I don't think he was ever actually romantically interested in Diane. I think he confuses romance with infatuation and codependence, which is why he doesn't do the whole love thing. Even with Hollyhock, he just can't say it because he doesn't understand it yet. He only knows how to distract himself. The Time Medium, and so many others, he dates for fame and attention. There are a lot of one-night stands that Bojack has had over the years and have never made it into the public eye, but he has also dated quite a few women publicly, bringing them to events and galas and award shows. We don't even ever meet any of these women besides Tilda Madison, and Bojack only really even talks to her because Hollyhock makes him. Basically, they dated for a short time, and when she became pregnant, Bojack sent her a check for half an abortion. These relationships are the most vapid out of them, because not only is Bojack just using these women for sex to fill that hole inside him, but he's also using them for attention, which can also help fill it. But again, once the relationship became an inconvenience, immediately it was ended without a second thought, because it didn't really mean anything to him in the first place.
I'll call you! Do you think I need to call her? Or did I leave things open enough where I can just kind of ghost?
I'm not sure he knew what dating actually was. I mean, he's not exclusive either, as we see from the pilot when he admits to cheating on Princess Carolyn.
God, that's good comedy.
Bojack!
What? Everyone gets a mulligan. And my mulligan was Carrie Mulligan. I'm kidding, jeez. It was Emily Mortimer.
And Gina was used for these same reasons. I mean, he barely even commits to Gina, and they are pretty much casually having sex throughout Filbert. It is a stretch to call that actually dating, but they do eventually begin to in the public eye, and Bojack, quote,
"Well, don't let it go to your head. It's just because you visited me in the hospital every day, and I got used to having you around, and it turns out I like you."
Uh-oh.
And the only reason that she was there for Bojack, though, during his recovery in the hospital was because he accidentally committed to her in an effort to find his pills the episode prior. There was nothing ever about Gina specifically that Bojack was even attracted to. We're introduced to their relationship so casually and matter of fact, and there is very little affection between the two of them ever, save for Head in the Clouds when Bojack is drunk and high.
Oh, hey, hot stuff. Whoa.
Also, most likely one of the reasons it ends so much more poorly than the others. Gina becoming an inconvenience to Bojack's personal agenda was really the perfect storm of Bojack's spiral into opioid addiction, not really truly caring about Gina, and confusing Filbert with reality. But ultimately, one big reason is that Gina is not of high value to him. All through the showstopper, Bojack is resolving to protect Gina, but that's only because he believes it's what he should be doing, and he's sinking further into his cliched role. It's really exemplary of this idea of Bojack just looking for something he needs in these women. Sometimes it's as vapid as sex, and it only lasts a fleeting moment for the sake of a quick distraction. Sometimes he commits more fully when there's something deeper that he needs, something emotional. But he always pushes them away when they get in the way of his self-loathing. This pattern always ends with devaluation. Once the distraction wears off, or once it's revealed that Bojack will never be able to get what he needs from another person because he has to do that work himself, he casts the entire value of the relationship aside. With Wanda, he blames her for not knowing who he truly is, when that was what attracted her to him in the first place. She tries to be the positive influence that he previously enjoyed having around, but all he wants to do now is drown. With PC, when she tries to accelerate his life forward at a speed that Bojack suddenly finds uncomfortable, he begins to dig and push until PC is further and further away. With Diane, once he sees that she isn't the person who's going to lift him up and instead sees him as a joke, he gives up on her work and sinks into a drug-fueled bender, and so on and so forth. So yes, there is a visible cycle in Bojack's behavior. Is it always done consciously or maliciously? Not always, no. But the pattern is there, nonetheless. As Bojack says in the second interview, most of the bad shit that happens in this world isn't because of wicked plots or machinations. And while Bojack is on the defensive here after Biscuit so clearly and vividly painted his pattern out in front of him, there is something to be said about this statement. He wasn't intentionally planning maliciously to take advantage of all these women, but the point is that he did take advantage, nonetheless. Whether it was for lack of self-control, or a need for validation, he used them, then cast them aside. There's just no other way to describe it, and there's no defending it either. Yay! I love talking about this show. I'm just joking, I actually do love talking about this show, and if you like listening to me talk about this show, consider subscribing. That'd be pretty cool. But if you want to support us further, you can go to patreon.com/PosiTVty. That's PosiTVty. There you can get all these videos weeks before they go up on YouTube. You get the unedited video essay, so you get to see me with all of my mistakes, and you can vote on what you want to see on the channel. So it's a great way to get extra content for yourself, but also support this channel in the process and help it grow into something we can all be proud of. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Let me know if there's anything I missed about Bojack's pattern or anything you'd like to add. I really appreciate the discussion on these Bojack videos. It's always fun to have. And while immensely depressing, I do love making them. So